Lisa had always loved visiting her grandfather's old ranch as a kid. The massive wooden gate at the entrance creaked like it had for decades, and the smell of hay and wildflowers would hit her the moment she stepped out of the car. Now, 6 months. After Grandpa Joe's funeral, she was finally ready to face going back there alone. The drive from the city took about 2 hours, winding through mountain roads that seemed to get more beautiful with each mile. She'd been putting off this trip for weeks, making excuses about work and other responsibilities. But deep down, she knew the real reason. Walking into that old house without hearing Grandpa Joe's voice calling out from the kitchen was going to be hard. When she pulled up to the ranch house, everything looked exactly the same. The red barn still needed a fresh coat of paint, just like it had for the past 10 years. The porch swing where she used to sit with her grandfather every evening still hung from the same rusty chains. But something felt different. Maybe it was just knowing that this place belonged to her now. Lisa had inherited the entire 400-acre spread, something that still didn't feel real. Her grandfather had built his life on this land, raising cattle and horses for over 50 years. The property had been in their family since 1904, when her great-great-grandfather first settled here with nothing but a wagon and big dreams. She grabbed her backpack and headed toward the front door, fishing around for the old brass key her grandfather had given her years ago. That's when she noticed something odd. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt driveway, and they definitely weren't from her small car. These looked like they came from a big SUV or truck. Walking around the side of the house, Lisa spotted more signs that someone had been here recently. Footprints in the soft earth near the kitchen window, and what looked like cigarette butts by the back porch. Her grandfather had quit smoking 20 years ago, and she'd never seen him allow anyone to smoke on his property. A chill ran down her spine. Was someone squatting in the house? She'd heard stories about people breaking into empty homes, especially ones that looked abandoned. But this place wasn't abandoned. It was her home now. Lisa decided to walk around the entire property before going inside. She wanted to make sure she was alone before she started going through her grandfather's things. The cattle pastures stretched out behind the house, empty now since she'd sold the livestock after the funeral. The old barn doors were slightly open, swaying in the afternoon breeze. As she got closer to the barn, she heard voices coming from inside. Her heart started pounding. Someone was definitely here, and they were talking like they owned the place. Lisa crept closer, trying to stay hidden behind an old tractor. Through a gap in the barn wall, she could see a woman in a business suit holding a clipboard and talking to a younger couple. The woman was pointing at different parts of the barn, explaining something about original construction and historical value. The couple was nodding and taking notes. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. This woman was giving them a tour of her property like she was some kind of real estate agent. But nobody had permission to be here. Lisa had all the legal documents in her car proving that she owned this ranch. She pulled out her phone to call the police, but then decided to confront them first. Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe they were lost or confused about which property they were supposed to be looking at. Lisa walked around to the front of the barn and cleared her throat loudly. All 3 people turned to look at her, and the woman in the suit immediately put on a big fake smile. "Oh, hello there," the woman said, walking toward Lisa with her hand extended. "You must be the neighbor. I'm Patricia, and I'm showing the Johnson family around their new property." Lisa stared at her in complete confusion. "New property? This is my grandfather's ranch. I own this land." Patricia's smile got even bigger, but there was something cold about her eyes. "Oh, sweetie, I think there's been some confusion. I purchased this property from your grandfather before he passed away. I have all the paperwork back in my car." The young couple looked uncomfortable, glancing back and forth between Lisa and Patricia. They seemed to sense that something wasn't right about this situation. "That's impossible," Lisa said, her voice getting stronger. "My grandfather never mentioned selling this place to anyone. I was with him almost every week before he died, helping him with his finances and medical appointments. He would have told me if he was planning to sell." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Sometimes elderly people forget to mention these things to their families. It happens more often than you'd think, But don't worry, I have all the legal documents to prove the sale went through properly. Lisa felt her anger building. This woman was not only trespassing on her property, but she was also disrespecting her grandfather's memory by suggesting he was confused or forgetful in his final months. "Show me the documents," Lisa demanded. Patricia hesitated for just a moment, then said, "They're in my office. I can bring them by tomorrow if you'd like. But right now I need to finish showing the property to my clients." "Your clients need to leave," Lisa said firmly, "and so do you. This is private property and you're trespassing." The young couple quickly excused themselves, clearly wanting to get away from the growing tension. They hurried toward their car, leaving Patricia and Lisa standing alone in the barn. Patricia's friendly act dropped completely. "Listen, honey, I understand this is emotional for you. Losing a grandparent is never easy. But this property belongs to me now, and I'd appreciate it if you'd respect that." Lisa couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. "I want to see your so-called purchase agreement right now, or I'm calling the police." "Fine," Patricia snapped, pulling out her phone. "But you're going to look pretty foolish when you realize you're wrong." She scrolled through her phone for a few minutes, then showed Lisa what appeared to be a scanned document. The quality was poor, and Lisa couldn't make out all the details on the small screen, but she could see her grandfather's name and what looked like his signature. But something felt wrong about it. The signature didn't look quite right, and the date seemed off. Plus, her grandfather had always been meticulous about keeping copies of important documents, and she'd never seen anything like this when she was going through his papers. "This doesn't prove anything," Lisa said. "Anyone can create a fake document on a computer these days." Patricia's face turned red with anger. "Are you calling me a liar? I've been a licensed real estate agent in this county for 15 years. I don't need to forge documents to buy property." "Then you won't mind if I have my lawyer take a look at this, will you?" Patricia suddenly seemed eager to leave. "You do, whatever you need to do. But don't come crying to me when you find out I'm right. And don't think about changing the locks or anything like that. I'll be back tomorrow with my contractors to start making some improvements." With that, she marched toward her car, leaving Lisa standing in the barn feeling completely bewildered. How could this be happening? She'd just inherited the property 6 months ago. The probate court had officially transferred ownership to her. She had the deed and all the legal paperwork, but as Lisa watched Patricia drive away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. Lisa couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about Patricia's confident attitude and that fake-looking document on her phone. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was. The next morning, she called her grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who had handled the probate case. He listened patiently as she explained what had happened at the ranch. "Lisa, I can assure you that your grandfather never sold that property to anyone," he said firmly. "I handled all of his legal affairs for the last 5 years of his life, and there was never any mention of a sale. What you're describing sounds like fraud." That made Lisa feel a little better, but she was still worried. Patricia had seemed so sure of herself, and she claimed to be a licensed real estate agent. Maybe there was some kind of legal loophole or mistake that Lisa didn't understand. Mr. Henderson suggested she install security cameras around the property and document any further trespassing. "If this woman shows up again, you'll have evidence," he said, "and call the police immediately if she tries to enter the house." Lisa drove back to the ranch that weekend with a bag full of small security cameras she'd bought online. They weren't expensive, but they would record anyone who came onto the property. She spent the whole day setting them up around the house, barn, and front gate. As she was finishing up, her neighbor Tom walked over from the property next door. He was in his 70s and had been friends with her grandfather for decades. "Hey Lisa, good to see you out here again," he said with a smile. "But I gotta ask you something. There's been a lot of activity over here lately. Cars coming and going, people walking around. Is everything okay?" Lisa's stomach dropped. "What kind of activity?" Tom scratched his head. "Well, there was a fancy SUV here twice this week. Saw a woman in a business suit showing people around like she was giving tours or something." Thought maybe you were thinking about selling the place. I'm definitely not selling, Lisa said quickly. That woman is trespassing. She claims she bought the ranch from Grandpa Joe, but that's impossible. Tom's expression turned serious. Your grandfather never mentioned selling to anyone. In fact, he told me just a month before he passed that he was so happy you were going to inherit this place. Said it meant the world to him that it would stay in the family. That evening, Lisa got a call from another neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived about a mile down the road. Lisa, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I saw some strangers at your grandfather's place today. A woman was showing a family around, and they were taking pictures of everything. I was worried someone might be casing the place for a break-in. Lisa thanked her for calling and explained the situation. Mrs. Rodriguez was outraged. That's terrible. Your poor grandfather would be so upset if he knew someone was trying to steal his land. You need to put a stop to this right away. Over the next few days, Lisa's phone kept ringing with similar calls from neighbors. Patricia was apparently treating the ranch like her own personal real estate listing, bringing different people by almost every day. The security cameras Lisa had installed were capturing everything. She watched in disbelief as Patricia showed up with couple after couple, pointing out features of the property and talking about investment potential and development opportunities. In one video, Patricia was standing on the front porch telling a young family about how they could modernize the old farmhouse and turn the barn into a charming event venue. Lisa felt sick watching this woman plan to destroy everything her grandfather had worked so hard to build, but the worst part was watching Patricia walk through the house like she owned it. Somehow she had gotten inside and was showing people around Lisa's grandfather's bedroom, kitchen, and living room. She was touching family photos and antiques, describing them as included furnishings that came with the property. Lisa immediately called Mr. Henderson again. She's inside my house, Lisa said, trying not to cry. She's showing strangers through my grandfather's bedroom and telling them they can have his furniture. That's breaking and entering, Mr. Henderson said angrily. You need to call the police right now and file a report. And I want you to bring me those security videos. We're going to put a stop to this. When the police arrived at the ranch, Patricia was there with another couple, this time measuring rooms and talking about renovation possibilities. The officers asked to see her documentation proving she owned the property. Patricia confidently pulled out a folder full of papers. But when the officers examined them closely, they found several problems. The signatures didn't match, the dates were wrong, and one document was supposedly notarized on a date when the notary's license had already expired. Ma'am, these documents appear to be fraudulent, one officer said. We're going to have to ask you to leave this property immediately and not return. Patricia's confident attitude cracked for the first time. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice getting higher. I have a verbal agreement with the deceased owner. Sometimes the paperwork takes time to catch up. A verbal agreement with a deceased person? The officer asked skeptically. How exactly does that work? Patricia started talking faster, her story becoming more complicated by the minute. First, she said she had a handshake deal with Lisa's grandfather. Then she claimed there was a witness to their agreement. When the officers asked for the witness's name, she said the person had moved out of state. The couple Patricia had been showing around looked embarrassed and quickly left. Patricia followed them to their car, trying to convince them that this was all just a minor legal hiccup that would be resolved soon. After Patricia finally drove away, Lisa felt exhausted. The officer who stayed behind to write up the report was sympathetic, but honest about what she could expect. Ma'am, this kind of thing happens more than you'd think, he said. There are people out there who target inherited properties, especially when families are still grieving. They count on people being confused or overwhelmed by legal processes. But she seemed so professional, Lisa said. She really does have a real estate license. That makes it worse, actually. She's using her legitimate business credentials to add credibility to her scam. We'll file a report, but you need to be prepared for her to come back. People like this don't usually give up after one warning. Sure enough, 2 days later, Patricia was back. This time she brought what appeared to be a lawyer with her. Lisa watched on her security cameras as they walked around the property, the man taking notes and Patricia pointing at various buildings. When Lisa called the police again, they told her it would take a while for them to respond because of other emergencies. By the time officers arrived, Patricia and the supposed lawyer were gone, but they had left something behind. Taped to Lisa's front door was an official-looking notice claiming that the property was under legal review and that Lisa should cease all activities until the ownership dispute was resolved. The document looked professional, with official seals and legal language, but when Mr. Henderson examined it, he immediately spotted problems. "This is completely fake," he told Lisa. "No real court would issue a notice like this and look at the signature. It's supposed to be from a judge, but it's completely illegible. Plus, the case number doesn't follow the proper format for this county." Lisa felt like she was living in a nightmare. Every time she thought she had Patricia figured out, the woman came up with new tricks and more elaborate lies. And the scary part was how convincing everything looked at first glance. "What am I supposed to do?" Lisa asked. "She's not going to stop, is she?" Mr. Henderson's expression was grim. "No, I don't think she will. But we're going to fight back. I'm going to do some research into this woman's background and see what we can find. Something tells me you're not her first victim." Lisa decided she couldn't wait any longer. She gathered all of her grandfather's legal documents, the security camera footage, and copies of Patricia's fake papers, then drove straight to the police station. She wanted everything officially documented, before Patricia tried something even worse. Detective Williams looked through everything carefully. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who seemed genuinely concerned about Lisa's situation. "I've seen cases like this before," he said, shaking his head. "Property scammers usually target people who've recently lost family members. They know you're dealing with grief and might not be thinking clearly about legal matters." He made copies of all Lisa's documents and assured her that they would investigate Patricia's background. But he also gave her some advice that made her stomach turn. "You need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better," he warned. "When scammers realize their first approach isn't working, they often get desperate and try more aggressive tactics." Lisa didn't have to wait long to see what he meant. The very next day, she found a bright yellow notice taped to her front door. It looked official, with bold letters across the top that read, "Notice of Eviction Proceedings." Her heart nearly stopped as she read it. The document claimed that she was illegally occupying property that belonged to Patricia, and that she had 72 hours to vacate or face legal action. It was signed by someone claiming to be a court clerk and included what appeared to be an official case number. Lisa's hands were shaking as she called Mr. Henderson. He told her to bring the notice to his office immediately. "This is completely fraudulent," he said after examining it for less than a minute. "First of all, eviction notices in this state have to be delivered by a sheriff or process server, not taped to your door. Second, the court address on here doesn't exist. Patricia literally made up a fake courthouse." Even though she knew it was fake, Lisa couldn't shake the anxiety the notice had caused. Patricia was escalating things exactly like Detective Williams had predicted. 2 days later, Lisa got a call from her neighbor Tom that made her blood run cold. "Lisa, you need to get out here right away," Tom said urgently. "There's a locksmith at your house and that woman is directing him to change all your locks." Lisa jumped in her car and drove to the ranch faster than she'd ever driven before. When she arrived, she found Patricia standing on the front porch while a man worked on replacing the front door lock. A van parked in the driveway had Johnson's Locksmith Services painted on the side. "What do you think you're doing?" Lisa shouted as she got out of her car. Patricia turned around with that same fake smile she'd worn during their first encounter. "Oh, Lisa, perfect timing. I was just having the locks changed for security reasons. Can't be too careful with vacant properties." "This isn't a vacant property. This is my house." The locksmith looked uncomfortable and stopped what he was doing. "Excuse me, ladies, but I'm getting conflicting information here. Who actually owns this property?" Patricia immediately jumped in. "I do. I have all the documentation in my car. This young lady is confused about the ownership situation." Lisa felt like she was going to explode. "Sir, I am the legal owner of this property. I inherited it from my grandfather 6 months ago, This woman is a scammer who's been trespassing and harassing me for weeks." The locksmith looked back and forth between them, clearly not wanting to get involved in their dispute. "Look, I just change locks. I don't get involved in ownership disputes, but I'm not going to finish this job until you two figure out who's really in charge here." Patricia's face turned red with anger. "I paid you to do a job. I don't care about her sob story. Just finish changing the locks." "Ma'am, I'm not comfortable with this situation," the locksmith said, packing up his tools. "You need to sort this out legally before I can help you." As soon as he drove away, Patricia turned on Lisa with fury in her eyes. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. "I own this property and I'm going to prove it. You can't stop me forever." "Actually, I can," Lisa said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police right now, and this time I'm pressing charges for attempted breaking and entering." Patricia's confidence wavered for just a moment, but then she straightened up and walked toward her car. "Go ahead and call them. When they see my purchase agreement, you're going to be the one in trouble." But Lisa noticed that Patricia drove away quickly, not sticking around to wait for the police like she claimed she would. The following week brought an even more shocking escalation. Lisa arrived at the ranch on Saturday morning to find a moving truck parked in her driveway. Two men were carrying her grandfather's antique rocking chair toward the truck while Patricia supervised from the porch. "Stop right there," Lisa yelled, running toward them. "Put that chair down, you're stealing my property." One of the movers looked confused. "Lady, we're just doing our job. This woman hired us to move some furniture." "That woman doesn't own anything. Here, she's a scammer." Patricia walked down from the porch with a clipboard in her hand. "Lisa, I understand you're upset, but this furniture was included in my purchase of the property. I have every right to remove it." Lisa looked at the truck and felt sick. They had already loaded several pieces of her grandfather's furniture, including the oak dining table where she'd eaten countless meals as a child, and the bookshelf that held his collection of ranching journals. "Those are family heirlooms," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "Some of that furniture has been in my family for over 100 years. "Well, it's my furniture now," Patricia said coldly. "Everything inside the house was part of the sale." Lisa called the police immediately, but it took them 20 minutes to arrive. During that time, Patricia kept directing the movers to load more items, acting like Lisa wasn't even there. When the officers finally showed up, Patricia handed them another folder full of documents. This time, her paperwork included what appeared to be a detailed inventory of furniture and personal items that were supposedly included in her purchase of the property. Officer Martinez examined the documents while Lisa explained what was happening. She could see him frowning as he read through Patricia's papers. "Ma'am, these documents don't look legitimate," he told Patricia. "The formatting is inconsistent, and some of the information doesn't match up." Patricia's voice got defensive. "Those are copies. The originals are in my safe deposit box, but I can assure you everything is legal and proper." "Even if that were true," Officer Martinez said, "you can't just show up and take furniture without going through proper legal channels. If you really own this property, you need to handle this through the courts." He ordered the movers to unload everything they had taken and return it to the house. Patricia was furious, but she couldn't argue with a direct order from the police. As the movers carried her grandfather's furniture back inside, Lisa felt a mixture of relief and dread. She had stopped Patricia this time, but she knew it wouldn't be the end of it. After everyone left, Lisa sat in her grandfather's old rocking chair and tried to process everything that had happened. Patricia wasn't just trying to steal her property anymore. She was trying to erase her family's entire history and legacy. That evening, Mr. Henderson called with some disturbing news. He had been researching Patricia's background and found several complaints filed against her with the State Real Estate Commission. "Lisa, I think we're dealing with someone who's done this before," he said. "I found records of at least 2 other families who filed complaints about similar situations. Patricia seems to target inherited properties and use her real estate license to make her scams look legitimate." Lisa felt her heart sink. What happened to those other families? That's what worries me. In both cases, the complaints were eventually dropped. Either the families moved away, or they reached some kind of settlement with Patricia. I'm going to dig deeper and see what I can find." As Lisa hung up the phone, she realized she was in for a much longer fight than she had originally thought. Patricia wasn't just some confused woman making a mistake. She was a professional scammer who had perfected her technique over several years. But Lisa also knew she wasn't going to give up. This ranch represented everything her grandfather had worked for, and she wasn't going to let anyone steal it from her family. Mr. Henderson called Lisa early Monday morning with news that made her feel both vindicated and terrified at the same time. "I spent the weekend digging into Patricia's background," he said, his voice serious. "What I found is much worse than we thought. She's not just targeting your property, Lisa. This woman has been running the same scam for at least 5 years." Lisa sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. "How many other families has she done this to?" "From what I can find, at least 4 others that we know of. And here's the scary part. She's been successful twice. 2 families actually ended up selling their inherited properties to her for way below market value just to make the legal headaches go away." The thought made Lisa sick to her stomach. She could imagine other families dealing with the same grief and confusion she'd been feeling, just wanting the nightmare to end. "How does she get away with it?" Lisa asked. Mr. Henderson sighed. "She's smart about it. She targets people who've recently lost elderly relatives, usually grandparents or parents who owned property for a long time. She knows these families are emotional and often don't understand estate law very well." He explained that Patricia had developed a whole system. She would read obituaries and monitor probate filings to find her targets. Then she would create elaborate fake documents and use her real estate license to give herself credibility. "Tjaka. Worst part is that she works with at least one accomplice," Mr. Henderson continued. "I found records of a man named Robert Chen who poses as a title researcher. He backs up her claims and makes everything look legitimate." Lisa remembered the man who had come to the ranch with Patricia a few days earlier, the one she'd thought was a lawyer. "I think I've seen him. He was at my property last week with Patricia, taking notes and acting official. That's probably him. From what I can tell, he creates fake title histories and property records to support Patricia's claims. Together, they've built a whole network of fraudulent documents." Detective Williams had been working on the case too, and he called Lisa that afternoon with more disturbing information. "We've been in contact with the other families who filed complaints against Patricia," he said. "I just got off the phone with Mrs. Thompson, whose family went through this exact same thing 2 years ago. Mrs. Thompson's story was heartbreaking. She had inherited her father's small farm after he passed away, and Patricia had approached her with the same claims about having purchased the property before the owner's death. Mrs. Thompson told me that Patricia wore her down over several months," Detective Williams explained. "She kept showing up with different people, claiming they were lawyers, title researchers, even claiming to have witnesses to the supposed sale. The harassment had been so constant and stressful that Mrs. Thompson's family eventually decided to sell the farm to Patricia for half of what it was worth, just to end the legal battle they thought they were facing." "But here's the kicker, Detective," Williams continued. "Patricia turned around and sold that farm 6 months later for 3 times what she paid Mrs. Thompson. She made over $200,000 profit on that scam alone." Lisa felt anger building in her chest. Patricia wasn't just a confused person making honest mistakes. She was a professional criminal who was deliberately targeting grieving families and stealing their inheritances. "What about the other family?" Lisa asked. "The Garcias. They owned a small ranch about an hour from your property. Patricia pulled the same routine on them, but they fought back harder than Mrs. Thompson did. The case dragged on for over a year." Detective Williams explained that the Garcia family had eventually won their case, but the legal fees and stress had been enormous. The elderly father had ended up in the hospital with heart problems from all the anxiety, and the family had nearly gone bankrupt, fighting Patricia in court. "The worst part is that Patricia never faced any real consequences," Detective Williams said. "Both families were so exhausted by the time it was over that they didn't pursue criminal charges. They just wanted her out of their lives." That evening, Lisa got an unexpected phone call from a woman named Betty Garcia. "Hello, dear. I heard through Detective Williams that you're dealing with the same woman who tried to steal our family ranch," Betty said in a kind but tired voice. I wanted to call and warn you about what you're up against. Betty told Lisa about the hell her family had gone through. Patricia had shown up at their ranch just 3 weeks after Betty's husband's funeral, claiming she had bought the property from him before he died. She had documents that looked so real, Betty said. Purchase agreements, title transfers, even what looked like my husband's signature. If I hadn't known my husband so well, I might have believed her. But Patricia had been relentless. She brought fake lawyers, fake witnesses, and even fake court documents. She had people calling the Garcia family at all hours, claiming to be from law offices and government agencies. She made our lives miserable for over a year, Betty said. My grandson had to move in with us because we were afraid to be alone. We couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. It was like being terrorized by someone who seemed to have unlimited resources. The Garcia family had eventually proven that all of Patricia's documents were fake, but the process had cost them their entire savings and nearly destroyed their health. I don't want to scare you, dear, Betty said, but you need to know that this woman won't give up easily. She's made a career out of this, and she's very good at it. Betty also warned Lisa about Robert Chen, Patricia's accomplice. He's the one who makes all the fake documents look so believable, Betty explained. He has access to official letterhead, legal forms, even fake notary stamps. Some of the papers he created for our case looked more official than real court documents. The next day, Mr. Henderson called with more shocking news. He had been working with a private investigator to dig deeper into Patricia's background. Lisa, we found something big, he said excitedly. Patricia and Robert Chen have been running this scam in 3 different counties. We found evidence of at least 7 families who've been targeted, and there might be more. The private investigator had discovered that Patricia would research inherited properties for months before making her move. She studied property records, obituaries, and even social media posts to learn about families who had recently lost elderly relatives. She's incredibly thorough, Mr. Henderson explained. She learns about the deceased person's habits, their relationships with family members, even their financial situation. Then she creates a story that sounds believable based on what she's learned. But the most disturbing discovery was that Patricia and Robert had been using a storage unit to keep all their fake documents and equipment. The private investigator had found records showing they rented the unit under false names and paid for it with cash. We think they have an entire operation set up, Mr. Henderson said. Computers, printers, official seals, everything they need to create convincing fake documents. This isn't some amateur scam, it's a professional criminal enterprise. Detective Williams called Lisa that same afternoon with news that made her heart race. We've got enough evidence to get search warrants, he said. We're going to raid Patricia's office, her home, and that storage unit tomorrow morning. If we find what we think we're going to find, she's going to be facing serious federal charges. Lisa felt a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. After weeks of feeling helpless against Patricia's elaborate lies, it seemed like justice might finally be within reach. What should I do if she shows up at my property again before then? Lisa asked. Call us immediately, Detective Williams said. Don't engage with her at all. We want to catch her in the act if possible, and we don't want her to know that we're closing in on her. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about all the families Patricia had hurt, and all the people who might still be suffering because of her scams. Tomorrow would hopefully be the beginning of the end of Patricia's criminal career, but Lisa knew the damage she had already done to so many families could never be completely undone. Lisa's phone rang at exactly 6:30 in the morning. It was Detective Williams, and she could hear excitement in his voice. Lisa, we got her, he said. We raided Patricia's office an hour ago, and you're not going to believe what we found. Lisa sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What did you find? Everything. Computers full of fake documents, official seals from courts that don't exist, letterhead from made-up law firms. She even had a whole filing system organized by victim, with notes about each family's emotional weaknesses and financial situations. The detective explained that they had also arrested Robert Chen at his apartment, where they found sophisticated equipment for creating fraudulent legal documents. He had been forging notary stamps, court seals, and even fake signatures for years. The scariest part is how organized they were, Detective Williams continued. They had detailed plans for targeting at least 10 more families over the next year. Your case was just the beginning for them. Later that morning, Mr. Henderson called with more details about what the police had discovered. "Lisa, they found files on your grandfather going back over a year," he said, his voice filled with anger. "Patricia had been researching your family since before your grandfather even passed away. She was planning this scam while he was still alive." The police had found photographs of Lisa's ranch taken months before her grandfather's death, along with detailed notes about the property's value and the family's financial situation. Patricia had even attended her grandfather's funeral to observe the family dynamics and plan her approach. "She's a predator," Mr. Henderson said. "She was literally stalking grieving families and planning how to exploit their pain for profit." That afternoon, Lisa got a call from Betty Garcia, the woman whose family had also been victimized by Patricia. "I just heard the news," Betty said, her voice filled with relief. "I can't believe they finally caught her. My whole family is celebrating today." Betty told Lisa that Detective Williams had called all of Patricia's known victims to let them know about the arrests. Some families were planning to file civil lawsuits to try to recover their losses, while others just felt grateful that Patricia couldn't hurt anyone else. "You know what this means, don't you?" Betty asked. "You saved other families from going through what we went through. If you hadn't fought back so hard, she would have kept doing this to more people." The thought hadn't occurred to Lisa before, but Betty was right. By refusing to give up and working with the police, she had helped stop a criminal operation that could have destroyed many more families. Over the next few weeks, more details about Patricia's operation came to light during the investigation. The police discovered that she and Robert had stolen over $800,000 from various families over 5 years. They had used sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques to wear down their victims and make them desperate to end the legal battles. They studied each family like they were preparing for war, Detective Williams told Lisa. They knew exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum stress and confusion. The police also found evidence that Patricia had been planning to expand her operation to other states. She had been researching probate laws in Arizona and Texas, looking for places where she could run similar scams without being detected. Patricia's trial began 6 months later, and Lisa attended every day. She wanted to see justice served, but she also wanted to support the other families who had been hurt by Patricia's crimes. During the trial, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Patricia's elaborate fraud scheme. They showed the jury hundreds of fake documents, recordings of Patricia lying to victims, and testimony from the families she had terrorized. Lisa was shocked to learn about some of the things Patricia had done to other families. She had hired actors to pose as lawyers and judges. She had created fake websites for non-existent law firms. She had even rented office space and pretended to run a legitimate title company. The defendant turned crime into a business, the prosecutor told the jury. She systematically targeted grieving families and used their grief against them to steal their most precious possessions, their family homes and legacies. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she genuinely believed she had legitimate claims to the properties, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding her guilty on all charges. When the judge sentenced Patricia to 8 years in federal prison, Lisa felt a mix of relief and sadness. 8 years seemed like a long time, but it could never undo the damage Patricia had caused to so many families. Robert Chen had already pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against Patricia. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all the victims. But the legal victory was only part of Lisa's healing process. She had spent so many months focused on fighting Patricia that she hadn't really had time to grieve for her grandfather or figure out what she wanted to do with the ranch. Now that Patricia was behind bars, Lisa could finally start making the ranch feel like home again. She spent weekends there, slowly going through her grandfather's belongings and deciding what to keep and what to donate. She found old photo albums that showed the ranch's history going back over a century. Pictures of her great-great-grandfather building the original barn, her great-grandmother working in the garden, her grandfather as a young man learning to rope cattle. Looking at those photos, Lisa realized that Patricia had never understood what she was really trying to steal. It wasn't just land or buildings or money. It was over 100 years of family history, memories, and traditions that could never be replaced. Lisa decided to keep the ranch and restore it to working condition. She quit her job in the city and moved to the ranch full-time, determined to honor her grandfather's legacy by making the land productive again. She started with a small herd of cattle and gradually expanded the operation. Neighbors like Tom and Mrs. Rodriguez became like family, helping her learn the ranching business and sharing stories about her grandfather. But Lisa also felt a responsibility to help other families who might face similar situations. She started working with Detective Williams and local victim services to educate people about inheritance fraud and property scams. Too many families don't know these scams exist until it's too late. Lisa told audiences at community meetings, "If we can warn people about what to watch for, we can prevent other families from going through what we went through." She also worked with Mr. Henderson to create a support network for families dealing with property fraud. They helped people find affordable legal representation and connected victims with resources for dealing with the emotional trauma of being targeted by scammers. The ranch became a symbol of resilience and family legacy. Lisa often hosted community events there, from cattle shows to educational workshops about property rights. She wanted the land to be a place of healing and education, not just for her family, but for the entire community. 3 years after Patricia's conviction, Lisa received a letter from Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had lost her family farm to Patricia's scam. Mrs. Thompson had used some of the restitution money from Patricia's conviction to buy a small cottage near her daughter's home. "Thank you for fighting when the rest of us couldn't," Mrs. Thompson wrote. "Because of your courage, that woman can't hurt anyone else. You gave all of us our dignity back." As Lisa read that letter while sitting on her grandfather's old porch, she realized that fighting Patricia had taught her something important about family legacy. It's not just about preserving the past, it's about protecting the future for generations who haven't even been born yet. The ranch would stay in her family, just as her grandfather had always hoped. But more importantly, other families would be safer because she had refused to let a criminal steal what wasn't hers to take.